Welcome back to the channel, guys. On today's video, we're going to dive in talking about beginner fishing mistakes that I've noticed over my 20 plus years experience bass fishing that, I'm guilty of myself, as well as some mistakes I've seen other anglers make over the years. So hopefully you like some of these tips I'm going to talk about today, hopefully to make you a better angler. And this is going to be geared towards that beginner fisherman. And hopefully you're not going to make the same mistakes that I did when I was starting out, and also that I've seen other anglers when they're starting out make. So guys, if you like this kind of content, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We would love to have you as a member. We do a lot of different hunting type videos as well as kind of focus on fishing. And at the location I'm at right now, we primarily do smallmouth fishing. So this video is going to be based around the smallmouth and the largemouth bass angling scene. So we're going to talk a little bit about both in regards to some of these mistakes. All right, guys, so let's dive into this video right now. All right, the very first mistake that I noticed people make, and when I started out, I did the same thing, and that is choosing the wrong gear to use. So what I mean by that is, I've seen people go trout fishing and they'll have a 7-foot 6-inch heavy power rod with 40-pound, 50-pound braid on it. And they're fishing for small little 12-inch rainbow trout at a trout park. That is the wrong gear for the wrong situation, guys. That is not what you need to do. So match the gear to whatever type of fish you're going after. So for bass, you really need to kind of keep it simple. For smallmouth bass, I use typically a 6-foot 6-inch medium power rod. And if you don't know what medium power is, fast action, that kind of stuff, please check out some of my other videos. I kind of break that down, as well as scour YouTube. They really have a lot of videos out there kind of breaking down all of that. So 6-foot 6-inch medium power rod, and this will get you through most fishing situations. If you're going after largemouth bass on a big lake or something, you could definitely go up to a bait caster. For most bait casters, I choose a 7-foot medium heavy power rod, and you could also do a medium power with that as well. But the bait caster is going to allow you to throw a lot of different types of lures, from heavy all the way down to very light baits. So it's kind of versatile in that sense. The spinning combo isn't going to be as versatile when it comes to throwing different types of baits. We'll kind of get into that in a different topic that's going to be coming up next. Okay, so I already said, I've seen people use the wrong gear, such as a really big rod in a trout park or whatever. I've also seen people try to bass fish with big catfish rods. So once again, it's one of those situations where it's not matching the gear to the right type of fishing you're doing. So definitely, if you're out there bass fishing, start out with the right gear. Get you a nice little spinning combo. It could be something from Walmart, guys. Just get out on the water, have fun with the right equipment. Okay, also under using the wrong gear is using the wrong type of line for your spinning reel or your bait cast reel. And I kept this under the same heading of using the wrong gear, just to kind of keep things simple. And we're going to be doing 5 different mistakes. So choosing the right line. You really want to use a line that is going to be right for your type of fishing. So if I'm out smallmouth fishing, I'm not pulling in huge, probably anything over 5 pounds when I'm out river fishing. It's just not feasible. They're not big lake smallmouth, so they're not going to be as big. So what I typically do is run 20-pound braid, and that's going to eliminate line twist, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well, with a 10 or a 12-pound fluorocarbon leader, and that is going to allow you to run that bait where only the bait is visible. The line really isn't going to be visible. Those smallmouth, they really key in on the visibility of the line, so that's something you really want to focus on. And also not using too high vis of a braid, especially if you're going to be using this for, let's say, running crankbaits or running jerk baits. It's just not good, because those fish are going to see that line coming through the water before they see that fluorocarbon and your bait. It's not as prevalent if you're fishing bottom baits where they're really not going to be seeing the line kind of swimming by with that bait. So it's not going to be as bad there. So that's what I run usually on my spinning combos. But guys, if you're just starting out, there is nothing wrong with running monofilament or straight fluorocarbon on your reels. But one thing to keep in mind is you will also want to keep it with whatever species of fish you're going after. So like I said, for smallmouth bass, 10, 12 pound fluorocarbon leader, 20 pound braided line. Also, you could go down with your braided line size. You could go down to 15 or even a 10 pound braid. And that is also going to allow you to cast really far. So if you're a beginner and you're used to bank fishing, if you go down to a smaller diameter line, you're going to be able to cast a lot farther. It's really going to help you out in that sense. If you have a bait caster, right now on this one I have 17 pound straight fluorocarbon. So fluorocarbon, it does not float and it does not stretch that much. So in that sense, it's going to give you some sensitivity, not as much as braided line does, but it's not going to stretch near as much as straight mono would. So it's kind of the best of both worlds in that sense, and it's also practically invisible when it's underwater. So that's also really good when it comes to fishing. But once again, matching your line to kind of whatever situation you're going to be fishing in. So if I'm fishing a big lake, there's a lot of heavy cover. I'm going to be flipping, let's say, tubes or big jigs into that heavy cover. What we're going to do is fish a 17 pound fluorocarbon, or sometimes I'll go down to 15, but no less than 15 or 12 pounds if I'm fishing a big lake. But on rivers, you know, it's kind of a different story. And I typically go with the spinning combo with that one. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up the number one mistake, which is choosing the wrong type of gear. Like we said, we want to use the right type of rod. We want to use the right type of reel. Right here, this is a size 30 or a size 3000 reel. And the reason you want to keep it kind of match it up in that regard is because if you're fishing that huge catfish rod with huge spinning reel under here, you're not going to be able to effectively fish for bass with that. So that's one reason you want to match up the reel and the rod for whatever species you're going after. So that's the number one mistake that I see. The number two mistake that I see is not actually learning how to use your gear properly. So if you really want to get out there and effectively bass fish, you really need to get to know your gear. So the first thing that comes to mind is not knowing how to use a bait caster. I see a lot of people go out and buy their first bait caster with super high expectations of this thing is going to solve all their issues when it comes to fishing all kinds of different baits. But they get discouraged because they can't cast it that well. Please take time, watch. I have a tutorial on how to cast a bait caster. There's a million out there on YouTube. Learn how to cast a bait caster. Everybody has to start somewhere. Just don't get discouraged. Learn how to use it. Learn how to dial in your reel first. That's the very first thing you need to do is learn how to dial the reel in. Don't just go out there and cast this thing, trying to cast it a country mile. You're going to bird's nest this thing and get super discouraged. You're going to be trying to pick this line out because it's in a huge bird's nest. It's going to take a long time to do that. So learn how to use your equipment, and that's going to save you a lot of time out there on the water. Also, you know, when it comes to spinning combos, it's the same thing. Learn how to prevent line twists, which are going to kind of foul up your reel. And one thing you can do to kind of mitigate that is when you cast your rod and your bail is open, when you're ready to start your retrieve, manually flip this bail over. That's going to prevent a lot of line twists. I'm going to do a video in the future on breaking down the mistakes that I see with spinning combos, and I'm also going to do a video, the 5 mistakes I see people do with bait casters. So please stay tuned for those videos. I'm going to kind of hone in on some of the different things I see people do with these different rods and reel combos. Definitely get to know how to use your gear. It's going to save you a lot of time on the water and a lot of frustration. And also it's going to make you a more effective angler in the long run. So invest time, and it's going to help you out in the long run. Okay guys, the third thing that I see people do, and I'm guilty of this as well, is choosing a good location to go fish. So the biggest thing here, guys, if you're not getting that bait in front of a fish's mouth or in front of that fish, how's it going to eat the bait? Okay, you have to be able to locate fish and target specific areas to get on those bass. So if you're looking at fishing big lakes, lakes can be very dynamic. You have a lot of different areas. You have all kinds of different structure, different things going on, right? So things I would typically look at first is what season is it? Is it super cold weather? Is it moving into spring? Is it summertime? There's different variables that kind of go into this. Definitely look up all this stuff on YouTube, and it's going to make you better in the long run, being able to target those specific areas to get your bait in front of those fish, which is kind of the main goal here. And it's going to make you a better angler in the long run. So look at seasons, look at structure. The kind of the way I keep it simple when I'm fishing a lake or even a river that primarily has largemouth bass, I'm looking for heavy cover, I'm looking for logs, I'm looking for laydowns, I'm looking for big rock piles, anything that's going to give those bass a lot of cover where they can hide behind an ambush, bait fish, crayfish, whatever is going to be swimming by. That is going to be their ambush points. So definitely look for areas where they can hide. Another thing I look for is if I'm going out and I'm fishing a hot sunny day, the sun is out, it's super bright. Roland Martin, if you haven't seen his channel, very, very, very good angler. Fished, as a pro for many, many years, one of the best out there. He says it the best. He says, bass don't have eyelids, so they don't like to be out in the sun. And it's just that simple saying right there, it kind of breaks it down for me. If it's sunny, the bass do not want to be out in the open water unless they're super deep, which the sun's not going to be as bright if they're down deep, so it's not going to be that bad for them. But they're going to be looking for those heavy areas of cover. That way they can shade from the sun. So definitely fish shady spots, and that is going to get you more bass, I promise you, during the daylight hours. That's why usually I do a lot of morning fishing as soon as that sun's coming up, because there's a lot of shade everywhere, or I'm fishing late of the evening where there's still a lot of shade along those bank lines. So there's kind of the two tips I have for kind of locating fish. If you're going after smallmouth on rivers, which is primarily what I do right now, what I'm doing is looking for areas of current. I want a lot of oxygen-rich water that's going to be created from that fast-moving current going across rocks. And it's going to be stirring up a lot of sediment. It's creating a lot of oxygen in the water. And those smallmouth are going to be waiting for bait fish to get washed over, let's say rapids, different things, where those heavy areas of current are. So definitely look for areas like that. Also with smallmouth, look for current breaks. So a current break could be a big rock that's in the water. It could be a pile of logs, anything that's kind of within that heavy area of current that's going to allow that fish to hide behind it so it can get out of that heavy current, so it can kind of take a break from having to swim so hard. So those are kind of areas I look for. I'll flip it behind that rock, and usually there's something sitting behind it in that current break. So definitely an area to look for when you're targeting smallmouth. Other than that, I'm kind of looking for shade as well. I found that with smallmouth, they're not as skittish of the sun. They'll kind of stay out in the open with the sun a little bit more than largemouth will. That's just because they're a little bit more active and they're willing to chase bait a little bit easier than the largemouth are. Largemouth are kind of lazy in a sense. They're not really willing to go out and chase bait as easy as smallmouth would. One of the philosophies I like, and I had to kind of teach myself this, and I wish I'd have done it a lot earlier on, and that is, I'm going to ask myself, when I do catch a fish, why did I catch that fish, or how did I catch that fish? What came together to allow me to catch that fish in that location? Was it the bait that I was using in combination with where I was fishing? Just like talking about current breaks, was it a current break right there where I flipped that jig or flipped the tube that allowed me to catch that fish that was hiding behind that rock? So different things to look at. Ask yourself when you're beginning, why did you catch that fish? And that's the same thing with bait selection. Why did you catch that fish on that bait at that time? Was it that time of the season where, bait fish are kind of spawning, the shad spawn's going on? There's a lot of shad in the water. Is that why the fish bit it? Is there a lot of crayfish in the water in your local river? Is that why they bit down on that jig? Ask yourself why. It's going to build your toolbox up. That way you can, kind of put the puzzle pieces together to make you a better angler in the long run. Also, when you're talking about big lakes, some areas to keep in mind are you're going to fish points, which are, let's say you had a long stretch of bank and then you got something sticking out. It's kind of different, right? It's different than that long stretch of bank. That can typically be called a point. And a lot of times fish will stack up on that because it's a different type of structure. It's different than that long series of banks. Also, they like to stack up in coves. So a big cutout that might be in that bank, they'll kind of stack up in there. But this is all dependent on, the weather. And is it pre-spawn? Is it spawn? Is it post-spawn? There's a lot of different factors that go into that. So choosing a good location is number 3 on the list. It's going to help you catch more fish if you're getting that bait in front of a fish to begin with. And also ask yourself why you caught that fish. And, it's going to make you be able to pinpoint some of those locations a little bit better in the future. Okay, when it comes to the number 4 on the list, we're talking about bait selection. So what you need to do now, if you're a beginner getting into bass fishing, let's say you want to be hardcore into bass fishing, you need to put down the live bait. And what I mean by live bait, going out to the local tackle store and you're getting a little tub of minnows, you're getting a tub of worms, put that down. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people lined on the riverbanks or at a pond or whatever, just drowned in worms. They're killing bluegills, they're killing the minnows they're throwing in there, and they're really not catching anything more than bluegill. All right, there's a reason for that, guys. And live bait has its place, but overall, you definitely need to move into artificial baits. You really need to fish something that you can effectively replicate a lot. This tube right here, I can throw this dozens and dozens of times, probably catch 5 to 6 fish on this one tube. I can't do that with a live minnow. And you're gonna have a better hookup ratio with this tube. So you kind of need to put down the worms, put down the minnows, and move into kind of getting serious about it and picking some baits that is gonna help you catch fish in the long run. And it's gonna be dependent on season once again. Also gonna be dependent on, the spawn, post-spawn, pre-spawn, different things like that. With picking a bait, you need to pick a bait that's appropriate for the location and the season. If I'm going to be fishing dead of winter for largemouth bass, this black and blue jig right here, I can throw this year round. And if you're just starting out, I would suggest finding a bait that you're comfortable with throwing year round. And it's just going to make it simple. And I can't go out to Bass Pro and effectively buy baits. There's just too much. And I've been fishing for 20 plus years and it's still very overwhelming for me. It's just too much going on at once. So that's why I stick to just going to Walmart or buying stuff off Tackle Warehouse, going to Academy Sports. It's a lot smaller section than going to Bass Pro. Or I just buy lures off Amazon or Cabela's or Bass Pro on their website. So keep it simple there. Fish a bait that you're going to be comfortable with fishing all year round, and that's still going to catch you fish. When it comes to seasonal baits, during the spring and the fall, a lot of times these red colors or the orange colors, where this could imitate a crayfish, when they're kind of molting and changing colors, this is kind of going to be a good choice. And during the shad spawn, throw in one of these rattle traps or a lipless crankbait is going to really be effective. So there's a time and a place for any kind of bait. Some of the ones that I'm very comfortable with throwing are, worms. I throw a lot of different types of trick worms, Senkos. If we're talking about smallmouth, I throw a lot of Ned rigs and tubes. And one of my confidence baits when it comes to fishing for largemouth is fishing just a regular green pumpkin 5-inch Senko. You can't get more beginner than this, and even pros still fish these 5-inch Senkos. It is for a good reason, because they work all the time, usually. A lot of times in the winter times, these won't be that great, but if you fish these from post-spawn through the summer into the fall, you're going to be golden with these. And they're really going to be effective for you, and you're going to pull in a lot of fish by using a bait that's going to be easy to fish like that. I usually Texas rig a worm or wacky rig a Senko like that. And definitely, if you don't know what those are, look those up on YouTube. There's a ton of tutorials out there on how to rig a Senko, Texas rig, and also any kind of soft plastic, you can rig it Texas rig like that. Some seasonal baits that you kind of want to stay away from, depending on what season it is like a topwater bait, where it's literally sitting on top of the water. It might be a walking bait. It could be a topwater popper. It could be a whopper plopper. Any bait that's going across the top of the water in that water column usually only work during the summertime. Okay, when the fish are willing to actually go to the surface and try to eat something. So some of those baits are a little bit more difficult to fish during spring, wintertime, and the fall. So you kind of want to stay away from those if you're looking to fish baits year round and keep it very simple. But then again, there's a time and a place for it. So build up your confidence level with whatever bait you're going to be fishing, but definitely do research. Do research, watch different videos on different baits to throw and when to actually throw them. That's probably the best advice, is when do you actually throw them. Jigs, crankbaits, and jerkbaits I usually throw year round, and they work pretty good. This is a crankbait if you don't know what a crankbait is. Jerkbait, I don't have one out here. Jerkbait is a little bit larger. Actually, I have one right up here. That's a jerkbait if you can see it. But they usually work year round because there's still some shad in the water, and the bass are willing to go after them. They're willing to feed up on a high protein food source like a shad. So definitely look at throwing some of those. Bait selection is number 4 on the list of mistakes that I see beginning anglers make. Okay, and number 5 on the list, this one kind of just sums up everything, and that is just be willing to try new techniques. Be willing to try new baits. Don't get stuck in a rut. That's the biggest thing I see people make the mistake with, is getting stuck fishing one bait. They might be comfortable. Let's say this is somebody's confidence bait. This big black and blue 3/8 ounce jig. They've caught, maybe their first fish on this. Maybe they caught their second, third, fourth fish, and that's all they caught all year. And they get super confident with this bait because that's what they caught their first fish on. So that's their confidence bait now, and that's all they want to throw. That's a big mistake right there, guys. Once again, learn new techniques, research new techniques. That way you can become a better angler and learn when you actually need to throw those. Don't get stuck in that rut. Don't get stuck in a rut of just using bait casters or using the spinning reel. There's a time and a place for every one of these. I can't throw this big jig on this spinning combo. This thing is just too heavy, and I can't fish it effectively and bounce it and pop it off the bottom very well with a spinning combo. So that's kind of where you want to move into a bait caster. Don't be afraid to move into a bait caster if you've been shied away from it in the past. So definitely get out there, learn new methods of fishing, use new baits, use new gear, and find out what works for you. Definitely don't give up on your confidence bait. It was a confidence bait for a reason, because it caught you some fish. But that doesn't mean that is the only bait that's going to catch you fish, and you might be missing out by not using other gear out there. All right, guys, that was our 5 mistakes that I see beginner anglers make, and these are ones that I've been guilty of in the past myself, and that I've seen my buddies make the mistake of when I take them out fishing and stuff. Just be willing to try new things. Don't use the wrong gear. Use the right gear for the right situation. Learn how to use your gear the proper way. Choose a good location to find those bass. Use a good type of bait that's going to catch you fish. Get away from using that live bait that you might have used as a kid. And also, just be willing to try new things. Don't get stuck in a rut. All right, guys, if you like this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We would love to have you once again. And if you liked videos like this and you found it helpful, you know, please place comments in that comment box below. I would love to hear some feedback from you guys on what you thought, and definitely place in that comment box what you think, you know, your 5 mistakes that you see beginning anglers make, or maybe that you've been guilty of yourself. You know, I'd love to hear what you had to learn from your experiences in the past. All right, guys, I'll catch you in those next videos. I hope you enjoyed this.